Hey everybody, let's take a look at some more political excess. Today we've got a final look here at the midterms, and everything at the time I'm making this video has still not completely been called. We're still waiting on Alaska, the results there with their ranked choice voting for that U.S. Senate seat, as well as their lone U.S. House seat. Even considering it's Alaska, I still think it's taking too long, and I think we deserve to know the results. However, having said all that, the Republicans are at 220 seats. Democrats have 212, 3 are undecided. In addition to the Alaska seat, we've got one in California, the 13th, and in Colorado, the 3rd district there, still not called. Lauren Boebert very slightly ahead. I would guess Democrats will hold that seat in Alaska. Republicans might hold the other 2 seats, but of course there could be recounts. That's a realistic possibility. But either way, Republicans, they have the majority, that is for sure. It's a very slim, narrow, underwhelming majority, but we will be back to divided government. The Senate and the governors were a disappointment for the Republicans. That's an understatement. But here in the House, we can see these close races. Of the closest, the ones that were 2 points or less, Republicans won 4 of them. Oregon's 5th, Arizona's 6th, New York's 22nd, and Arizona's 1st. And Democrats, they won 5 at 2 points or less of these races. Oregon's 6th, New York's 18th, Washington's 3rd, New Mexico's 2nd, and Colorado's 8th. And these aren't even considering the seats that the Republicans underperformed on in the Rust Belt. So Democrats actually got very surprisingly close to retaining the majority, but Republicans should have had about 10 more seats out of this midterm, if not even more than that. Now, if we want to talk about the popular vote, well, here on Wikipedia, the last update here is Republicans have 50.8%, Democrats 47.7%. That might narrow up still just a little bit more, but the results are basically in at this point, so it's about a 3-point advantage for the Republicans on that popular vote. And if we switch over to Real Clear Politics and take a look at that generic congressional ballot, the final results in the aggregate were a 2.5% advantage for the Republicans, so this wasn't really all that far off as far as the popular vote goes. So it's a bit of a confusing midterm. There's plenty of articles out there that attempt to explain why that is. Here's one of them here. I'll scroll through it, but I think it boils down to certain parts of the country wanted to maintain the status quo, other parts of the country wanted to make changes. Of course, candidate quality is a factor, but I think it's hard to say how much of a factor. Turnout operations in some of these contested swing states and competitive purple districts, it just didn't favor the Republicans. And the Democrats having a 1 or 2 or 3 point advantage, that made all the difference, as that translated into probably an extra 5 to 10 seats where it mattered. And if we go back here to New York Times and we look at the trends for the House compared to 2020, we see a lot of red arrows out there, even in places you wouldn't expect to see them. On the West Coast, Washington, California, there's a bunch in Texas, Florida, New York, Wisconsin even. But there are a few blue arrows out there, and those are kind of harder to see, but those are in some of those key areas in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio. So my opinion is going into the next election, the presidential election, I don't think either party is going to feel too confident about what their expectations are. Over the last few election cycles, we've seen a lot of unexpected results. Anything could happen. And even though the generic congressional ballot polling in the aggregate was mostly correct, some of the individual polls and individual races in the Senate and for governor, they were not correct. They were off by a little bit too much. And those did favor the Republicans. So nobody's going to feel good about polling either. There's going to have to be adjustments within the polling industry. So as far as the Senate and governor's races, we know those were a wipeout for the Republicans basically. Still going to have to go through that runoff for Georgia. Raphael Warnock is probably going to win it, but we've seen a lot of things that happen that were unexpected. Could be another time where Herschel Walker pulls it out and surprises everybody. But the last thing I want to talk about with the House is redistricting. There's a lot of articles like this out here. I'm just going to pull this one out from the Washington Post and scroll through here. This says the Republicans, they've already won the House because of the gerrymandering through the last redistricting process. Now, I think this article is pretty slanted to the left, in my opinion. Some other articles are more balanced. I try to mention both sides. Republicans clearly had a major advantage in Florida. That map favors them a lot, although they did very well there anyway. They might have been able to do that even with a much more neutral map. And maps in Ohio, those were favorable for the Republicans. But Democrats did well there. They picked up seats. I do think the map in Alabama probably does favor the Republicans too much. Surprisingly, there's no mention of the Texas map in this article. Earlier in the year, when redistricting was happening, I was hearing how Texas is one of the most egregious maps in the country. I always thought that was overblown. I thought it favored the Republicans, but they held back a little bit, and they could have made it even more in their favor. And Republican maps in North Carolina, those were struck down, so Democrats got some gains there. As well in Tennessee, that was a complete gerrymander, so Republicans could pick up an extra seat there. I don't want to go through every single example, but I do point out where Republicans took an advantage in the redistricting process. However, this article doesn't really mention the other side, and that's the problem. I think the Democrats, they had some distinct advantages in the redistricting process themselves. I've reviewed every single map on this channel. Take a look at those videos, and my most egregious map out of all of them, but especially drawn by the Democrats, was in Illinois. There's no mention of that in this article. Republicans should have definitely one more seat in Illinois, probably 2 seats, maybe even 3 seats. I think in California, Republicans are coming up short there for sure. With 52 seats, the Republicans, you'd think, would probably have a third of those seats, but they don't get close to that. Oregon was another bad gerrymander against the Republicans. New Jersey, Republicans completely come up short there. They should have a seat in Connecticut. Rhode Island, Providence split right down the middle, so Democrats maintain both of those seats. So just mentioning the one side would be misleading and incomplete, to say the least. So I just wanted to mention that, but as far as redistricting goes, that process is basically over. However, there will be some court cases coming up, and that could affect maps that have already been put in place. There could be redrawings mid-decade, and one more advantage for the Republicans. They did win those 2 state Supreme Court elections for North Carolina, as well as the one in Ohio. That will probably be a boost for them if they redraw those maps, and they could pick up another 2 or 3 seats even in the next election. But anyway, that's all I've got for this midterm, now that it is basically completely in the books outside of that Georgia runoff and whatever happens in Alaska, and short of any recounts. There's going to be a lot of new investigations, a lot of gridlock coming up in Washington. I doubt Kevin McCarthy is going to be all that effective. He's probably going to be the next Paul Ryan. We'll see how the media covers it, but I'm not having a lot of faith in the neutrality of it, and things will start shaping up for 2024. So we'll see if anything good comes from all this, or if it's just going to be more of the same. So let me know in the comments down below any final thoughts on this midterm, any individual races, and if you enjoy this channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I will see you on the next video.